I can guarantee that if you're taking private lessons of any type, that you can be getting more out of them than you currently are. Take it from someone who has taken 20 plus years of private music lessons, and from someone who has taught for a very long time private music students. I've seen both perspectives, and I've had some really, really wonderful, insightful, amazing lessons that are just eye-opening, and I've had some kind of meh lessons. And it's about the teacher as well, the teacher showing up and being really present and there for you in your lesson, but it's also about you and what you can bring to the lesson and how you can get more out of it. So stick around in this video to find out how to get better private music lesson experiences. If you're new here, my name is Dr. Natalie Law, and I'm a professional bassoonist and music teacher, and I love to help people learn how to play the bassoon and feel confident playing this instrument. If that's a topic of interest to you, please subscribe down below and give me a like if you find this video helpful or at least interesting. In order to get the most out of private music lessons, you want to make sure that you're coming to lessons prepared. It seems like kind of a given, but there's a little bit more to it than just making sure that you practice in between lessons. If you had a previous lesson, you want to make sure that you've done anything that your teacher has asked you to do, you've worked through any exercises, you've made progress in some way on the material you're working on, and that you're showing up to the lesson having practice. That's kind of a given and kind of obvious thing. There are a couple other ways to come to your lesson prepared. You want to come prepared mentally. You want to come prepared, ready to learn, ready to be in a place where you can accept information. And sometimes it's hard to be in that place. If you're having, a bad day or you've got a lot on your mind, it can be really hard to come to a private lesson that's kind of already scheduled in the week, ready to learn. I have always found it helpful that when I was taking lessons, to try and practice right before the lesson. So practice maybe a half hour, an hour before you meet for the lesson, and that way you're sort of in the mindset and you're kind of, bassoon or whatever instrument you're playing is fresh on your mind, and you can just go into the lesson with that sort of mindset. If you just sort of sit down without having touched your instrument all day, it's going to take you a minute to get kind of into the groove of things. Another element of being prepared that I have found super helpful, and I don't think a lot of people do this, is that when you're practicing throughout the week, write down, have a notebook or maybe in a notes app on your phone, write down questions or problems that you come across in your playing, and be really investigative about it. Play the detective in your bassoon playing and try to figure out, okay, this doesn't sound right, and I'm not sure maybe why it doesn't sound right or what I'm doing, but this is where I'm stuck. Everything seems to be going fine, and I get to this point and it's that's where I'm stuck. And take note of it. Don't just put it in your mind, because guaranteed you're going to forget it when it comes to the lesson. I used to, when I was taking regular lessons, have a notebook, and I would write down random questions that came up in my brain, or sometimes they would just be topics where it would pop into my mind and I'd be like, wow, I need to ask my professor about that because I just don't know the answer to that, and I've been curious about it for a while, and it's kind of random, but I want to know about it. And that way you can sort of go into the lesson with the questions. This is really helpful because I can tell you as a teacher, we generally know what your level of playing is at, what your strengths and weaknesses are, the general progression of where you need to go, but we're not inside your head thinking your thoughts as best as we try to do. I know with my students, I generally can tell what's going on and where we need to go, but sometimes there's a hang up somewhere where I as the teacher don't realize what the hang up is, and so it's good as a student to try and start that conversation, because likely once you ask the question or you start the conversation on this particular topic, you're going to get information that fills in the gaps that maybe you didn't know you were missing. And that's a really great way to sort of absorb the information about your instrument. Related to writing down questions and bringing them to lesson, you want to take notes during your lesson. I found that when I was taking lessons regularly, that not only would I mark things in my music like, oh, I missed a accidental, so I'm going to mark in that sharp, or I'm going to mark in a different dynamic marking in my music. That's kind of like typical music marking that you're going to do, but also maybe have a sheet on your stand when you're working with a teacher, where you can literally write down words and sentences that they say. There have been times where I've had a teacher say something like really eye-opening to me, and I'm like, wow, I never have thought about it that way. That's such an interesting way to think about it. And like, then a week later, I forget exactly. I knew it was amazing, but I forgot what it was. So writing down those things, especially when the teacher says something really insightful to you, or if the teacher says something to you like you need to do this, this, and this with this part, but maybe you don't fully understand it, that's another good point to write down. Take a minute and write down, okay, I have to do this, this, and this. And then it's going to take maybe, a couple days after your lesson for you to really digest what they were saying and really try it in practice. Because a lot of times in the lesson, we don't have time for you to fully digest things and work things through at the pace that you need to really grasp the concept. And so, in the lesson, you're just trying to get, the information from the teacher, as it comes. And then, the digesting and the practice and the slow, methodical way of approaching things can happen in your own practice time. The lesson should never be your own practice time. I know I don't have to tell you that, but I have had to tell some students that, your bassoon playing should not be only when you have a lesson or a rehearsal. You need to be practicing outside of lessons. Another tip for getting the most out of your music lessons is to take consistent lessons. I am one of those teachers that's pretty flexible with students about our lesson scheduling. I have students that I see every single week, and we take, occasional weeks off, but for the most part, I see them every week. And those are the students that progress the fastest. We kind of keep up momentum and we keep pushing forward, and I see the most success with those students. I have other students who kind of pop in for maybe once a month lessons or kind of as needed lessons, and that's totally fine. I'm pretty flexible with that. But I will say that the students who are taking regular lessons are having the most success and getting where they want to go faster. And part of the reason is because, from my perspective as a private teacher, when I don't see a student, say for a couple weeks, maybe there's a couple weeks that go by every time I see them, we kind of have to restart each time. I kind of have to say like, how's it been going? How's your playing been? And they have, you as the student have to think back like, okay, over the last few weeks, what has been going on? And maybe there was a miscommunication at the last lesson and we didn't work on the right things or something. And then you kind of have to restart, and now multiple weeks have gone by, whereas, each week you can kind of check in. I understand completely that sometimes it's not the best for your particular situation to take weekly lessons. Sometimes you can't afford it. Sometimes it's hard to schedule. There can be a plethora of reasons why you're not taking regular lessons. I totally get it. But I will say taking regular lessons is the fastest track to success. Another tip to get the most out of your lessons is to record them, either audio or video, ideally both. You don't have to record every single lesson, but maybe just occasional lessons. Maybe if you're preparing for a concert and maybe the final lesson before the concert where you've got things pretty much performance ready, you record and listen back, and particularly listen to yourself, but also listen to what your teacher says to you and what your teacher points out, because they're hearing things probably differently than you, and they're going to point out certain things, and you want to really listen for what did they hear, and then when they asked you to fix it, how did the sound change? I have found, and this happened when I was a student, I have found that a lot of times in my lessons, when there was something that didn't sound right, my teacher would say, that doesn't sound as good as it could. Try approaching it like this, or try doing this different exercise or something. And then I would try it and they might say, wow, that sounds so much better. I would often think to myself, I can't really hear the difference, between the two. And it's always hard because it's like, as a student, you want to be honest with your teacher, but you also don't want to disappoint them by saying, I don't hear the difference. But it's really important that you be honest. This is another kind of tip within a tip. Be honest with your teacher about whether you hear something or don't hear something. Because if you don't hear something, they can dive deeper into that with you and maybe start describing with different adjectives what they hear, so that you sort of get on the same page. And the best way to kind of like hear the difference is to go back into that exact moment where that change was happening, and after you've recorded it, and hear it in the lesson, because you're literally recording and you're hearing back to the moment where you were getting better. But that's kind of the turning point. Like, are you going to keep doing that thing that your teacher suggested where you're going to keep getting better, or are you going to kind of ignore it and kind of revert back to your old habit? So record lessons. I teach a lot of Zoom virtual lessons. If you're interested in taking lessons with me, I'll put a link down in the description. You can take 30 or 60-minute virtual Zoom lessons with me, especially if you don't have a private teacher in person that you're working with. Zoom is nice because it's very easy to record. So that can be a really great way if you're taking virtual lessons. Another tip for getting more out of your lessons and your time with your teacher is to be clear to your teacher when you don't understand what they're telling you. If your teacher is trying to explain something to you, and I can say this from my standpoint as a teacher, like I will explain something to a student, and usually I know the student well enough to kind of tell if they're understanding it or not. But sometimes I can't tell, or it's a student I'm not as familiar with, so I can't tell by the body language, like if you really understand what I'm saying. So be really clear with the teacher that you don't like, hey, I'm trying to understand what you're saying, but I don't get it. Like, is it like this? And it's the teacher's job to find a way for you to understand, to maybe use different adjectives to describe what they're saying, or to just try a different exercise or try a different avenue. Or maybe the teacher realizes, oh, like we're not quite at this point yet. Maybe we need to take a step back and start before that. That has happened to me both as a student and a teacher in lessons where I realized that, maybe we're talking further along than where the student's ability is. And we need to kind of back up and like make sure that we've got that foundational knowledge. And as a teacher, I can't help you if I don't know that you don't understand me. So make sure you're clear to your teacher when you don't understand things, and say when you do understand things, because sometimes it's not always clear in those interactions. And my final tip for you for getting the most out of your private lessons is to approach your lessons with an open mindset. There are going to certainly be lessons or times, especially if you study with a private teacher over a long period of time, where maybe they say to try something and you think, that's not going to work. I've tried that before. It's just not going to work. And I've certainly had these moments in my own development where teachers have said things to me, and still to this day, I think back, I don't really know what they were getting at there. Or I'm not totally clear. I think about it differently, and that's totally okay. Like, it's okay to think about things differently and have disagreements and things, but really try your best to approach these lessons with an open mindset and really try things that they suggest. Because a lot of times in our development, the light bulb doesn't come on right away. It comes on several weeks, several months, several years down the road. And the teacher is probably planting the seed for that light bulb to go off. But you have to give it a chance before you can expect to be perfect at it. So even if something doesn't feel right in terms of your playing, like it just doesn't feel like it's working, keep giving it a go. Maybe in your own practicing, try to think about it in different ways. And this is where studying with other teachers can help. With my students, if they have an opportunity to study with someone else other than me, I'm happy for them, because a lot of times different teachers will focus on different things and will say things in a slightly different way that helps you understand, or they'll focus on a different area of playing that your normal teacher doesn't focus on as much. And so I really encourage you, if you can, take lessons with multiple teachers. I think there's a balance. In my experience, I've had times where I felt like I had too many teachers at one point, where I was kind of going through different teachers, and it was good, but it was also confusing because they would say sort of conflicting things. So, I think the ideal situation is to have sort of a primary teacher that you're working with on a regular basis. Maybe occasionally, I don't know, a couple times a year, seek a lesson with someone else, and have them give you their take. I hope you got something from this video, an idea to make your next private music lesson more engaging, more insightful, to make sure that you're getting the most out of it. Because, I know I want to make sure that with my students that, you're getting what you need out of it. And, certainly it takes having, a teacher who is there and present with you and engaging with you. But it also takes, you as the student to come to the lesson prepared and ready to learn, and asking the right questions, and trying to have a back and forth conversation is so important to really getting anywhere with lessons. So I hope this was helpful for you. If it was, give me a thumbs up on the video, and I'll see you in the next one.